The world remembers the hairy angel who made Simon Cowell roll his eyes. But while the cameras were off, Susan Boyle was fighting a secret battle that nearly killed her. A massive stroke stole her voice. Diabetes ravaged her body. She was trapped in a silence louder than any applause. But today, at 64, she has re-emerged. The woman standing on the red carpet is unrecognizable. She didn't just survive, she transformed. Take a deep breath before you see her now. You are not ready for the truth. The woman who walked out of the fire. To understand the magnitude of this transformation, we must look at the present day. We must look at the woman standing before us in 2026. Forget the image burned into your memory from 2009. Forget the gold-lace dress. Forget the frizzy hair. Forget the nervous, twitching woman who looked like she wanted to run away from the camera. The woman who recently stepped onto the red carpet in London was a stranger. She wasn't wearing the frumpy clothes of the past. She was wearing a sophisticated black and white floral gown, draped in an elegant fur wrap. But the biggest shock was her hair. The unruly curls were gone, replaced by a chic blonde bob that framed a face glowing with health. She looked radiant. She looked expensive. She looked happy. But it wasn't just the styling. Anyone can hire a stylist. It was the way she carried herself. This was different. It was the eyes. For 15 years, Susan Boyle's eyes held a mixture of fear and confusion. She always looked like a deer caught in the headlights, waiting for the next blow to fall. She looked like she was apologizing for taking up space. But look at her now. The fear is gone. In its place is a steeliness, a quiet, unshakable confidence that only comes to people who have looked death in the face and told it to wait. When reporters asked her how she felt, she didn't stammer. She didn't look to a handler for permission to speak. She looked directly into the lens and smiled. "I'm still here," she said. 3 words. But they carried the weight of a war. The public was shocked. The internet exploded with headlines about her glamorous makeover. They talked about Ozempic. They talked about plastic surgery. They talked about the superficial A side of her life. They missed the point entirely. They looked at a survivor and saw a fashion statement. They didn't see the limp she was hiding. They didn't hear the slight slur in her speech that she worked tirelessly to correct. This transformation wasn't about vanity. Susan Boyle didn't lose weight to fit into a Hollywood mold. She didn't change her hair to please Simon Cowell. She changed because she had to. She changed because her body gave her a final ultimatum: change or die. This isn't a story about a makeover. This is a story about a resurrection. It is the story of a woman who was crushed by the weight of the world's expectations, broken by a terrifying medical emergency, and who had to rebuild herself, brick by brick, in the silence of her empty house. She is beautiful now, yes, but her beauty is the kind that comes from scars. It is the kind of beauty that Hollywood cannot manufacture, because it cannot be bought. It must be earned in the fire. And to understand how hot that fire was, we have to go back. We have to go back to the moment the world decided that Susan Boyle was a joke. The girl with the broken brain label. Before she was a meme, before she was a viral sensation, she was just Susie. And Susie was never supposed to make it. Born in Blackburn, West Lothian, Scotland, in 1961, her entry into the world was traumatic. She was deprived of oxygen during birth. The doctors looked at the baby girl and gave her parents a label that would hang around her neck like a millstone for 50 years. Brain damage. They told her mother, Bridget, not to expect much. They said Susan would struggle. They said she would never be like the other children. Imagine growing up with that sentence hanging over your head. In the gritty, working-class schools of Scotland in the 1960s and 70s, there was no mercy for the different. Susan was Susie Simple. That was the cruel nickname the other children gave her. They mocked her. They threw things at her. They chased her home. She was slow to learn. She was socially awkward. She didn't understand the unwritten rules of the playground. She was an alien in her own hometown. She found safety in only 2 places. The first was the church. In the quiet of the pews, surrounded by stained glass and the smell of incense, nobody laughed at her. God didn't care if she was simple. The second place was beside her mother, Bridget. Bridget Boyle was a force of nature. She was the shield that protected Susan from the cruelty of the world. She told Susan that she wasn't damaged. She told her she was special. She told her that she had a gift. because when Susan opened her mouth to sing, the brain damage disappeared. The pitch was perfect. The tone was pure. The emotion was ancient. It was as if God had compensated for her struggles by giving her a voice that could touch the divine. But the world outside her living room didn't want to hear it. They saw a frumpy girl with learning difficulties. They saw someone who didn't fit the package. For 47 years, Susan lived in the shadow of her mother's apron. She didn't marry. She didn't have kids. She didn't move out. She cared for her aging parents. She went to Mass. She sang karaoke at the local pub, where the locals tolerated her but never truly respected her. She was the cat lady down the street, the eccentric woman who talked to herself. Then the darkness fell. In 2007, Bridget passed away. For Susan, this wasn't just a loss. It was an amputation. Her mother was her compass, her manager, her best friend, her protector. Without Bridget, Susan was a boat without an anchor in a storm. She stopped singing. She sat in her house, surrounded by memories, and waited for the silence to consume her. She could have ended there. She could have been just another anonymous tragedy. A woman who lived and died in a small town, unknown and unloved. But she remembered a promise. On her deathbed, Bridget had made Susan swear a vow. "Do something with that voice," she said. "Don't let it die with me." It was that promise, a daughter's duty to her mother, that forced Susan out of the house. It forced her to take a bus. It forced her to stand in line in the rain with thousands of people half her age. It forced her to walk onto a stage in Glasgow, wearing a gold lace dress that she thought looked elegant, but the world thought looked ridiculous. She wasn't trying to be famous. She wasn't trying to be rich. She was just trying to honor a ghost. She didn't know that she was walking into a trap. She didn't know that the world was sharpening its knives, ready to carve her up for entertainment. The industry that eats its young. April 11th, 2009. The date is etched in television history. But let's look at it through the seventh lens. Let's look at what actually happened that night, not the fairy tale version they sold us. Susan walked onto the stage of Britain's Got Talent. She was 47. She was round. Her eyebrows were unruly. She did a little shimmy with her hips that was awkward and endearing and cringeworthy all at once. Look at the faces of the judges. Look at Simon Cowell. Look at Piers Morgan. They aren't looking at her with curiosity. They are looking at her with contempt. They are rolling their eyes. They are sighing. They are exchanging looks that say, "Let's get this over with so we can laugh at her." The audience is worse. They are wolf whistling. They are snickering. It was a modern-day Colosseum, and Susan was the Christian thrown to the lions. They wanted her to fail. They wanted her to be bad so they could feel superior. This is the ugly truth of our culture. We love to build people up, but we love to tear them down even more. We love to mock what we don't understand. And then, she sang, "I dreamed a dream in time gone by." The reaction was instant. The shock, the standing ovation. Simon Cowell's face transformed from boredom to dollar signs. He didn't see a human being. He saw a product. He saw a viral moment before viral was even a common term. Overnight, Susan became the most famous woman on earth. YouTube views ticked up by the millions. Oprah called. The Pope invited her to sing. It was the ultimate Cinderella story. But Cinderella stories are dangerous because they end at the wedding. They don't show you the marriage. Susan's marriage to fame was abusive from day one. She wasn't equipped for it. Remember, this was a woman who had lived a quiet, sheltered life in a council house. She had learning difficulties that were still undiagnosed. Suddenly, she was thrust into a pressure cooker. The paparazzi camped on her doorstep. They threw stones at her window to make her come out. They mocked her clothes. They chased her down the street. Sony Music, Simon's Machine, put her to work. Albums, tours, interviews. They treated her like a machine. Sing, Susan. Smile, Susan. Don't be weird, Susan. But Susan was weird. That was who she was. The pressure cracked her. Within weeks of the final, she collapsed. She had an outburst at Heathrow Airport. She screamed. She grabbed a mop and started polishing shoes. She shouted that she couldn't take it anymore. The media called it a meltdown. They called her Unstable Susan. They laughed again. Look at the crazy cat lady losing her mind. They didn't see a human being in a mental health crisis. They saw content. She was admitted to the Priory, a psychiatric clinic. She was sedated. She was isolated. It was the first sign that the golden cage was closing in. She had the money now. She had the fame. But she had lost her peace. She was surrounded by handlers, agents, and managers who viewed her as a cash cow. They pushed her to release album after album. The Gift, Someone to Watch Over Me, Standing Ovation. She sold 25 million records. She generated hundreds of millions of dollars for the industry. But look at her eyes in the photos from 2012 to 2015. She looks tired. She looks scared. She later admitted that she felt like an imposter. She felt like a fraud, and the cruelest twist was yet to come. In 2013, she finally got a real diagnosis. She went to a specialist who told her the truth. She didn't have brain damage from birth. She had Asperger's syndrome, high-functioning autism. It was a revelation. It explained everything. The social awkwardness, the anxiety, the sensory overload. It meant that for 50 years, she had been fighting a battle she didn't have a name for. It meant that the industry had been pushing an autistic woman to the brink of insanity for profit. She felt a sense of relief. It was a relief to know I wasn't just Susie Simple, she said. But the damage was done. The years of stress, the years of cortisol flooding her system, the years of poor diet on the road, they were taking a toll. The body keeps the score. And Susan's body was about to send her a bill she couldn't pay. The silence in the throat. By 2020, Susan had largely retreated. The pandemic hit, and she locked herself away in her home in Scotland. But the real crisis happened in April 2022. It was a secret she kept for over a year. A secret that nearly ended everything. It started with a headache, a numbness in her face, a slurring of her words. Susan was alone in her house. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't form. Her arm felt like lead. She was having a major stroke. For a singer, this is the ultimate nightmare. A stroke doesn't just attack the body, it attacks the instrument. It attacks the brain's ability to control the vocal cords, the tongue, the breath. When she woke up in the hospital, the silence was deafening. The voice that had made the world cry was gone. She couldn't sing. She could barely speak. Her speech was garbled. Her face dropped on one side. The doctors were grave. They told her that her touring days were over. They told her she might never sing professionally again. They told her she needed to focus on basic survival, not high notes. Imagine the terror. Her voice was her identity. It was her connection to her mother. It was the only thing that made her feel valuable in a world that judged her for everything else. Without her voice, who was she? Was she just the brain-damaged spinster again? For months, Susan vanished. The tabloids speculated. Where is Susan? Has she gained weight? Is she reclusive? They didn't know she was fighting for her life. She was also diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. It was a double blow. Her lifestyle, the comfort eating, the stress, it had all caught up. The doctors gave her a choice. You can continue as you are, and you will die. Or you can change everything. Susan looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a woman of 61 who looked 80. She saw a woman who was trapped in a failing body, and she made a decision. She wasn't going to let the story end like this. She wasn't going to let the stroke win. She began a grueling regimen of rehabilitation, speech therapy. Every single day, she had to relearn how to form vowels. She had to relearn how to control her breathing. It was humiliating. It was exhausting. She would sit in her living room, trying to sing a scale, and only a croak would come out. She would cry. She would throw things. But she would try again. She hired a vocal coach. She started working out. She cut out the sweets, the cakes, the comfort food that had been her only friend for years. She wasn't doing it for a magazine cover. She was doing it to save her life. She wanted to sing again. She wanted to prove the doctors wrong, just like she proved Simon Cowell wrong. It was a lonely battle. There were no cameras documenting her struggle. There were no fans cheering her on in the rehab clinic. Just Susan, her grit, and the ghost of her mother telling her to keep going. This is the B-side of the story. The grit, the pain. We love the overnight success story. We ignore the long, hard road back from hell story. But this is where the real heroism lies. Not in singing a song on TV, but in learning how to speak again when half your face is paralyzed. The house that love built. While she was rebuilding her body, she was also making a radical choice about her life. When Susan became a multimillionaire, everyone expected her to change. They expected her to buy a mansion in Beverly Hills. They expected her to buy a fleet of cars. They expected her to surround herself with an entourage. And for a brief moment, she tried. She bought a large detached house near her old home. It was the Posh House. It had 5 bedrooms. It had security gates. It was what a star was supposed to have. But she hated it. She felt lonely there. It was too big. It echoed. It didn't smell like home. So she did something that confused the entire industry. She gave it away. She handed the keys of the Posh House to her niece. And she moved back to the semi-detached council house she grew up in. The house where her parents died. The house where she was bullied. The house where she dreamed. She bought the house next door and knocked the wall through to make it a bit bigger, but it was still just a council house in a working-class neighborhood. Why? Because Susan Boyle understood something that most celebrities never learn. She understood that happiness isn't in square footage. It isn't in marble floors. Happiness is memory. Happiness is community. She wanted to be near her neighbors. She wanted to be able to walk to the local shop and buy a pint of milk. She wanted to ride the bus. She rejected the golden cage of celebrity. She chose the iron cage of her past, but she gilded it with her own freedom. This decision protected her. When the stroke hit, she wasn't isolated in a gated community in Los Angeles. She was surrounded by people who knew her before she was famous. She was grounded. And financially, she was smart. Unlike so many stars who go broke, Susan, with the help of trustworthy advisors, saved her money. She lives on a fraction of her wealth. She is worth an estimated £22 million, nearly $30 million. But she lives on a budget of a few £100s a week. She buys her clothes at high street stores. Until recently, she doesn't have a private chef. She is the anti-Kardashian. And this frugality gave her the ultimate power. The power to say no. When the industry wanted her to tour while she was sick, she could say no. She didn't need the paycheck. When they wanted her to do reality TV, she said no. She bought her freedom. This leads us to the resolution. The moment she decided to step back into the light, but on her own terms. The last laugh. In the summer of 2023, Susan reappeared in Scotland, unrecognizable after losing 50 pounds. But the true revelation came when she returned to the Britain's Got Talent stage. When she sang I Dreamed a Dream, the voice wasn't just powerful, it was deeper, richer, and textured with survival. Even Simon Cowell stood up and blew her a kiss. He knew what she had fought to overcome. Now in 2026, her red carpet transformation is more than just fashion, it is a victory flag. She is telling the world, you tried to break me, you tried to mock me, but I won. She lives entirely on her own terms. No husband, just her cat Tessie. No lonely mansion, just the home she loves. Susan rejected the superficial glitz of plastic surgery and fake romances. Instead, she embraced her health and her authentic self. While other reality stars faded away or crumbled under pressure, Susan outlasted them all. She is the tortoise who beat the hare. So when you see her new look, don't just say, wow, she looks great. Say, wow, she is strong. Take a deep breath before you see her now, not because she is pretty, but because she is powerful. She is living proof that it is never too late to rewrite your story, heal your body, and have the last laugh. What do you think? Do you admire Susan for staying true to her roots and moving back to her council house? And do you think the industry owes her an apology for how they treated her in the beginning? Let us know in the comments below. We celebrate the survivors. This is The Seventh Lens. Thank you for watching.